You're listening to the Human Experience on Design in Focus, a new multimedia channel seeking to demonstrate the impact and value of CID in business and society. CID, creativity, innovation, and design. On the Human Experience, we talk with creatives, innovators, and designers about these disciplines and what it means to them, and how they find value, stay inspired, what they have learned, and what they aspire to do. Hi, and welcome to the Human Experience. Today I'm speaking with Nick Mann, and we'll be talking about visual and UI design. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Candice. It's wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and introducing the topic we'll be talking about?
Yeah, so I am Nick Mann. I am a UX designer. I come from a graphic design background, and that's where through my journey of understanding the graphics and then going into web design and then figure out what is the UX design aspects of it and how I make my decisions matter. And that's why we will go over the topics of the UI design, the visual design of like how we make with mobile apps and interfaces on or like websites. And the reason why the UX design just functionality works in a way that people can interact and solve their problems for why they are using these devices.
Pretty cool. I also would like to touch a little bit on your podcast, UX Growth, is it?
Yes, I
Yes.
I am the host of the UX Growth podcast, where I just talk with a variety of different designers in the UX field and go over about their experiences, their journey, and how it can help you grow as a designer in yourself. And it's just such a fascinating journey of talking to people all around the world.
Exactly. I love your podcast. I think it's very well done, and I also like one of your participants in particular, Mitch Clements. I've had a conversation with him
Yes, I
myself,
know.
and
I was actually really
yeah,
incredible how I got him on, because I felt like I was a nobody. So I was like, oh man, he's probably not even got to see my email. And I was so excited that he was just ready to be on, like no problem.
yeah,
I was like, wow. And to be able to hear his story about how he got into it. Man,
yeah,
he not only does he do his fantastic posts on social media, I highly recommend following him because he gives such powerful insights, and he's just a good person, even off camera. I was
yeah.
blown away by him.
Yeah, definitely. And well, I think your podcast is also amazing. Listening to you and Mitch is really, yeah, it was really refreshing, and I really enjoyed it. And also your other podcasts, but of course, I don't know everybody there. But yeah, so let's jump into it. What have you learned through your podcast and through your experience? And yeah, what's the best
I
in
think a
your
lot of
human
it,
experience?
yeah, the
Sorry.
bit in terms of human experience, one thing I noticed about the UX design field and talking about so many different people across the world is that it's all universal problems of how we go about finding the user and going through the testing and going through implementation and communicating with teams and then finding out a solution. It does not matter what location of the world you are, what exactly application you're working on. It's just all universal systems that has been proven to work. Not to say that there might be changes in the future, but of course, because the field is so big, it's so new, there's ever growing, but it feels like it's such a universal methods of how we process information and how we implement them. It's really an incredible eye-opening experience that I always just felt like people from other countries kind of have their own way, like how we have our own cultures and languages, but not with UX design. It's all universal. That really blew my mind.
Very cool. And you also came from a graphic design background, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you study multimedia or graphic design specifically?
Yeah, I studied graphic design at Pacific Lutheran University in a small town of Tacoma, Washington State. It's a very, very small school. Most people, even in the region, never even heard of it. And it really focused on the printing and the branding aspects. And I grew as a designer to the other fields of web design through the agencies I worked at. But the principles of what you'll learn, the graphic design and these formal settings are the foundations that can be applied anywhere. And that's what they really set in stone for it. And it's very amazing because you learn about like the contrast, you learn about the proximity of design elements together. You learn about like the alignment of where things are being placed. Where does the eye go? How are we able to find things? Because naturally for us, like we read like left to right. In some countries they read right to left, and that's a difference of the things that like we need to keep in mind for our users based on the regions that we work in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always really fascinating for all the different aspects of visual design. Not only that, but also things like color, typography,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just a lot of the concepts of where we see the visual and representations of like imagery, like how
Mm-hmm.
big the things need to be, like
Yeah.
where we see with our eyes and the information that needs to be known. Like I started with poster design, brochures, and there's even UX design related to that, because how can someone get through the information in mere seconds and get what's
Mm-hmm.
necessary? And realizing
Yeah.
that people don't like to read these like they're novels. People
Mm-hmm.
don't have the time to go through every single page. They just want to skim through what is necessary to know. Okay, I got what I need, and now I can move on to making a decision with this information.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into the method of UX design without even knowing what UX design was at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because even then, you needed to decide your decisions of what you do as a visual designer. Because you can't just say, I chose this font because it's pretty. I chose this color because it looks nice. People need more rationality in the way that the
Yeah.
brand forms together for the user so it makes sense when they connect to it
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, okay, I resonate with this business because this is solving values that I care about.
Yeah.
So that's like the
Well,
overall brief, overall comprehensive look at the visual design.
yeah. I think UX design has just amplified design, you know.
Hmm.
There are a lot of hot debates about whether visual design is part of UX. But yeah, we experience through our senses.
Yeah.
Audio, visual, all our senses is what gives us the experience. If you take that away, you lose experience, So I do think like what is lost for a lot of people is, especially when they're coming from, let's say, a strategy background where they look
Hmm.
more into how to make people do things. Um, they forget that they're in a field which has its foundation in visual design. It's that's how we first, or one of the first ways that people, like if you look at Christianity, with Jesus, the image of Jesus, the paintings, the symbolism, and the way that makes people feel, how that helped that religion grow, so
Hmm.
experience through creativity has been around for a really, really long time. The in our art, in our music, in our writings, everything really. So I think it's quite an important topic, especially within UX. Do you
Yeah, I
agree?
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Because of the reason why a lot of the arts and the culture of performance arts, the reason why that all is so well known and test the over concept of time is because of that's how we are easily remember and things last. Because
Yeah.
before that, we had to share via stories, and that requires
Hmm.
memory. And
Hmm.
that doesn't always add up throughout all the decades and centuries,
Yeah.
like what art can do. The reason why
Hmm.
that's a lot of the things that is everlasting, and how we are
Yeah.
able to now present that emotion. But now we with design, now we do we do the art, the emotion of the art into a communicating of what we want to tell the people through these imagery, through typography, through color now. So instead of
Hmm.
also like expressing something, we are also telling someone
Yeah.
what action to be taken part. And there's there's songs like that. There's feelings of like, I don't know, heartbreak, there's feelings of joy. There's also like songs for like telling the people to be more advocates, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of different ways that people are interpret their art into a commanding voice that people
Yeah.
can be able to rationalize it.
Well, it's like, yeah, if I'm not I don't know a lot about music, but I do enjoy music, and
Mm-hmm.
uh different music give me different experiences. I don't listen to one particular genre. If I want to be energized, I listen to stuff with a beat. If I want to focus, I'll listen to
Mm-hmm.
classical, or I like binaural beats.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, and it just really helps me focus because it's so non-intrusive. So I think you can communicate
Mm-hmm.
and get people to feel and behave in certain ways with music as well. So really, everything that appeals to our senses is something that can be designed with or used to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Side note, I listen to a lot of music. I've actually Spotify says I listen to over 93,000 hours a year.
Wow.
I
That
know.
is,
I know. Even I'm like, oh man, that might be a little too much. So, but
yeah.
I know a vast amount of different music genres and stuff like that. So I'm always down to talk about that. But of course, we're on the
Mhm.
topic of visual design.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah. I saw that you did some cards, some visual cards, with some. I think it was the high cards only that I saw. I only saw three. And I thought that was really cool because, yeah, I've just designed a deck of cards for a workshop I'm giving, but it's
Yeah.
nowhere as nice as yours. And I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Like,
so yeah, a little background information about that is it was a capstone for my graduation from college. Yep, and I designed 52 cards. They're all based off of this mythology of different kind of the kings and queens of their time, and through all the different processes of what they look like, and I add their own personalities to it. Like there were some kings holding an ice cream cone. There were some kings holding a sword. And it kind of based off of what is their personality for what they
yeah,
because there was nice kings, there was bad queens and stuff like that through history, and that's how we were
yeah,
be able to remember for all their
exactly.
different rulings for these cards. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
really cool to be able to showcase a lot of these like fun different
Yeah.
personalities.
That was it's a really lovely design. But do you still design like that today as a UX designer? Do you do graphic design in your work?
It depends on the project. That's what it really comes down to. But I've always worked with small agencies, like under 15 people, where you need to wear a lot of hats. So sometimes there have been
You know what I mean?
times to come up like, hey, it's not so much about whether or not you can do this, it's how soon can you get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So I've also
Yeah.
like dived into front dev work myself. Not a big fan of it, but hey, I'm able to do the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript when necessary.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. And it's a blessing because it allows me to not feel bored in my work because I'm always doing some new things, new challenges, but also I'm growing as a professional, not even just a designer, but overall scope of like, well, how other people do their jobs and a way to be able to connect it all together.
Yeah. I like doing multiple things. I get really bored with just a singular thing. So I think that's the way to go. I prefer
Mm-hmm.
jobs where I have to wear multiple hats. Um, what in your experience is the best thing about visual and UI design?
Oh, the base is really understanding what is the branding values, and to be able to make sure that everything you make in your visual design goes through that, making sure
Hmm.
that it connects well. for example, a high energy tech startup for like energy, it's going to be like either looking at green for saving either money, or it's going to be more ecologically friendly. But also, like, you can look at yellow colors. You can look at for the light bulb, stuff like that. So there's things like for example, like a dating app can look at the colors of red. That's a very passionate color. A lot of social media apps use blue because it's such a passive color that people are always interacting when they can, and they're reading and scrolling and not always, being such high energy. So that's why we gotta like know the difference between those aspects,
Yeah.
and why you don't see these colors used with other these kind of brands, because they can clash with the feeling of what they're trying to represent. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you gotta look at like the branding of like what is the message that they're trying to say, and every information you're trying to make for the visual design goes into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The when we look in at our world, the colors, the shapes, the forms, it gives us a whole lot of yeah, I guess the human experience. It makes up the human experience. Are there any things that you have learned as an individual in the industry that you think is valuable for everybody to know, or at least to look into, that yeah makes it yeah, I don't know, like
I would
uh
say I would say learning about how we communicate our problems or concerns that come up. And I think that's definitely its own challenge, because not everyone is good at that. Not everyone's able to incorporate their own feelings about how they see things, and to be able to interpret why things may not work out the way it does. That's the challenging parts of like the design aspect of the UX, or even graphic design, definitely, because you're going to get a lot of ambiguous statements, and it's up to you to find out what does that mean.
mm-hmm.
And it can definitely be its own challenge. I know a lot of designers just absolutely like are so tensed up because of how much that happens in their job, and how it can always prevent them from doing what they can do. But they also need to take a step back and realizing that some people just need to be able to feel more empowered and being able to say what is it that needs to be said, so that they can
Mm-hmm.
find out what are the necessary things that they could be changing. And that comes through questions. And as
Yeah.
you know, as UX designers, we're all about probing questions, about figuring out why things the way they are, and how they can be improved. So you can even look at this as like its own UX challenge about how can we talk about design in a way that it feels more objective, and
Yeah.
understanding that like, it's not about how we feel about colors, typography, and the layout, but also feeling about the users, where they are able
Yeah.
to see it, and does that make sense for them? Because we also got to
Yeah.
just go back to remember we are not our own users. That's why we got
Mhm.
to look at information, look at
Yeah.
data, and be able to see what can we make from that.
It's quite interesting. I studied with well, obviously quite a few people, but the people who made it through and the people who didn't make it through, the difference was that those who didn't make it, they only applied their own tastes and the colors that
Mm-hmm.
they liked. There was one person who liked pink, so everything was always pink, even a rock band, a dark rock cover that we had to make. So really like putting yourself next to what you know is a big talent that we need to
Mm-hmm.
develop. Even if you really hate something, you still need to be able to create with that besides yourself, and that's where empathy really comes in, because you have
Yes.
to think of the other person. And so that's where the user experience comes into graphic design or visual
Mm-hmm.
design, because you're already thinking about another person. So it's already like ingrained in you by the time you're done studying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how we learn our styles as we become designers. So for the process of like what comes naturally to us, for example, that person really loved pink. So it makes sense for them to always use pink because it feels comfortable to them. It's what comes naturally. And as we go for designers, sometimes we can find a brand that just comes naturally. Maybe that person finds one that's all about pink, so maybe they work with
Exactly.
the Barbie dolls and like, yeah, man, super pink all the way, and more power to them if they're able to do that.
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes like we don't have that luxury of where we get to just choose what company we work with that are able to work with us. And
Mm,
sometimes that like, hey, we have to compromise ourselves, but not necessarily in compromising in a bad way, but more of how we have to grow and learn from ourselves, getting out of our comfort zone, and then being able to realizing like, oh, maybe this part isn't so bad. Maybe I unlocked something that I didn't know I had within me that is now empowering me to
mhm.
become a better designer. That's one thing about like agencies that I love, because there's so many different clients for different needs, and they all have different
Mhm.
users that we need to tap into.
Yeah.
So we have one for like a dating app is going to be one for like college students. Gonna have one for an e-commerce website that was selling like falconry equipment. So like we got to figure out about the like a lot of them people were regarding animal sanctuaries. So like
Mhm.
all these different types of people that like you need to always think about and learn from. And it's
Yeah.
just fascinating because you can't just do one simple solution for everyone, because
Mhm.
this is
No.
not you can't put a square shape through a circle hole for everyone.
No. I this week I spoke to Dr. Robert Kozma. He wrote the book Make the World a Better Place, Design
Mm,
with Passion, Purpose, and Value. And it's part of an ongoing conversation that I've been having recently about the responsibility of designers. And while you were speaking about, not always being able to work on what you'd like to work on, I think that's a topic that's very relevant because we are working within parameters, and sometimes we can't do what resonates with us. We need to stick to a brief or to a persona or something like that. Are there ways that you have found in your career that we can overcome that, or better uh yeah, be more dynamic and do better within the restrictions
mm.
that we have?
I think a lot of it is comes from learning from other designers, from their from where everyone comes from, because everyone comes from a different part of the world that we may not even know about, and that's how we learn from other aspects that we don't even think about. For example, if I'm doing accessibility for blind people, I'm not that user. I can see perfectly well, so I don't think about the problems that a blind person would
Yeah.
have. I don't think of like any kind of like culture regions that they may have that I learned from. So that's one thing about it also, is our own biases about where
Yeah.
we assume about things, and we make decisions based on that. And sometimes it can be very deep rooted in us and how we make our decisions. A lot of us don't
Mm-hmm.
know about this. That's the reason why like a lot of diversity happens in teams. So like someone can say that, hey, what
Yeah.
about this that like no one would ever thought about? It was like mind blowing. And then we can
Mm-hmm.
learn from that. Like, whoa, okay. So like
Exactly.
you can just definitely look back on that. So also like, and I feel like I might or digress, sorry, into another topic of how we go about education and how that never stops. Because a lot of
Yeah.
designers, I feel like they learned their style, they got what they need from their portfolio
Yeah.
school, and got that job, and now they feel like they're doing a great job. That's all they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, and then they stop learning, and then
Yeah.
the trends come and go, new tools
Yeah.
arrive, new different cultures come into the workplace, things change from the from the workplace, and it's like they don't adapt to it because they stop learning. They feel like they've made what they need to do, and that's all there is to it. I feel like that's where a lot of hardships people have with within how they work, but also about how they go forward with their career. So, I don't mean to digress too much into that, but I do feel like that all ties into
Yeah.
how can we do better.
Yeah. Well, currently I think we're at a stage in our evolution where this is a very relevant thing to think about, especially if you look at Midjourney and other creative AI tools. How do you think that's going to impact visual design and visual
Ooh.
designers in
I
the
think
coming times?
I think it's something that we're gonna learn to all embrace and being able to learn from. And then we're going to have its own niches within that because there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be times that people want a lot of information to be able to be passed around as quickly as possible. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
also going to be different types of styles that people are going to want. And I think there's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
lot of adaptability that people are going to be using within themselves. So I know there's a lot of fear mongering about what these career paths are going to look like. Are they going to completely change? Are they going to be removed? The thing about that though is that we as humans are terrible at predicting things. It's like back in the 80s when people are said like now we're going to be having hoverboards. Where are the hoverboards? It's like a
Yeah.
lot. There's also like I could just rant off the media. It doesn't really help at all, but also the fact that one thing about it is that we are definitely going to be using it and we're going to be empowering our careers further about what are the
Mm-hmm.
things that we can do now and how we can do it better and more of it. So it's
I
not
think.
about something that we should fear, it's something that we should embrace.
Mm. I think the only fear or the main fear that I have with it is how accessible it is and how, for example, if you've got a whole team and they're creating a data model and they're training the AI, and then you've got another person who has to purchase an AI membership or, service or something like that. The capabilities of both will be dramatically different. And so I think there's a great danger there in segregating the classes further and creating more poverty for the poor and enabling the rich to, yeah, if it's a possibility, within the
It always
within the
is.
realm of what humans do throughout history. If you look at history and how
Mhm.
we've shaped the world with the new technology that we've had, you see that it's created a lot of that already. So, do you
Mhm.
do you have any ideas about that or any feedback?
Yeah. So yeah, not to say that there's always the possibility of that happening, especially as we can look throughout the history. But also, thing that we need to remember is that there's never been more opportunities to becoming living a life that we wish that we had, and that's always
Hmm.
increasingly happening. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, and I used to be this way, where I was stuck in the scarcity mindset, where I feel like
Hmm.
where I can only get what's available that I see, and not looking at all
Hmm.
the opportunities that could present itself because you're outward, you are meeting new people, you're learning new skills, you are becoming a better version of yourself. And with that opens a lot more possibilities to be able to
Yeah.
find out like where is it that you are in the economical system and
Hmm.
then be able to improve what you know from there and then what you can gain. So I feel like there's definitely is going to be challenges to people, but I also feel like there's just been more opportunities than ever, as well as the
Yeah.
fact that like everyone is becoming more understanding of ourselves.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the human experience can be greatly improved for some people and yeah, not so much for others, but it doesn't, yeah, maybe I'm hoping to be wrong, It would be
Yeah, no,
great to be wrong.
I know I know it's okay to think of the worst case scenario and mentally prepare for it. But
Hmm.
the thing is, though, is that we can fall into the scarcity mindset and not see about the
Yeah.
opportunities that can be moving us forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's just somebody once recently said to me, "Oh, you're so critical. You're overly critical." And I think, that comes from when I was studying design
Mhm.
because my one teacher was so harsh. Everything had to be criticized. If you thought something was little bit okay, it was like, no, it's horrible. Fix it, do better. So maybe I'm just a little bit too critical. But yeah, it's exciting times nonetheless. And for
Oh yeah,
me, I enjoy listening to podcasts and looking at other people, talking to other people, like you said.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah. I even just forgot to mention, like what? No one knows about the jobs that AI is going to create, because
yeah,
like look at social media, all the jobs I made from there, all the jobs for internet. Like this wouldn't be possible. These podcasts wouldn't be possible without this.
yeah,
And now, like we are expanding more and being able to have more opportunities to find more solutions to problems that are now being created. Because what? AI is
yeah,
not going to be perfect. It's currently not perfect. I don't think it's going to be
yeah.
perfect for a while, and that's the reason why that it's going to open up a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. Well, what is perfection in any way?
That is
It's a
true. That is true. And that's. I mean, I can even digress into that about how the world does not respect perfectionism because everyone has a different definition of it.
and as a visual designer, that sometimes is a little bit more exaggerated as well because if you have an assignment and you have two people who are decision makers, this one has a vision, this one has a vision, whose perfect vision do you follow?
Yeah, I know, and we always go with the ones that resonate with our values, and that's what it comes down
Yeah,
to. And it's very hard to criticize values because everyone's different about the reason why they have that.
yeah,
So once and that's how we grow as a person when we understand from other values and realizing like, oh, okay, that person is not bad just because they're different from me. That's like we're taught at a very early age to not think like that from other people, and yet you see that all the time on social media.
yeah.
It's like a lot of people. It's like, and I can rant about some of the problems about that, but I don't want to digress.
All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time. So, are there any words that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I look at other people who are all learning designers, and because that's where I come from, I think a lot of it that we need to learn from is the fact that yes, we can do it. Is this you need to show up for it every single time,
Yeah,
because if you don't, it's not going to happen.
yeah,
Wishes and dreams. They're all your wants, but if they're not on the to-do list of you showing up for it, it's just not going to happen. And
yeah,
that's how we all become better versions of ourselves, because you have to actively work for it. You're not going to wake up and it's going to happen. It's not going to knock on your door, tomorrow.
yeah,
You are the driving force for that to happen. And it's easy to fall
yeah,
into excuses about, oh, something didn't happen because of, someone came late, and a lot of things. Like we come up with so many excuses for the reason why we don't do something. I'm not gonna say I'm
yeah,
perfect. I always show up for every single thing I do, but the difference is
yeah,
I always try. And a lot of times at the end of the day, is that trying is the effort that we need to put ourselves into, because there's times we're gonna be knocked down, but it's also important to how we get back up. So that's my answer to that.
Well, guys, if you've enjoyed this talk, then you can listen to Nick some more on his own channel, which is details, please.
Yes, you can find the UX Growth podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, but you can also check out the website, theuxgrowth.com, where you can check out any information of the podcast as well as me personally. Be sure to also follow me on Twitter, that is @mandesigner, and also on LinkedIn, which is also the @mandesigner through the URL link of LinkedIn. But you can just Google search and you'll find it.
If you're watching this on Design in Focus, then you can also find all the links on his page. And if you're on YouTube, then we'll post it below. And thank you very much for your time, Nick. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Hey, it was it was amazing, Candice. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this session, please subscribe to us and follow us on social media. Visit designinfocus.org for more information and content. Design in Focus is a labor of love and can use any and all support. If you'd like to help keep us alive, please consider making a small donation.